Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever been reading a highly regarded piece of ancient scripture and felt, like you're just skimming the absolute surface, like there's this massive iceberg of meaning underneath the words, but you're only seeing the very tip? Well, today we're going to fix exactly that. We're exploring a deeply fascinating, time-tested framework that human beings have used historically to extract incredibly rich, multidimensional meaning from ancient texts. It is quite literally the art of reading between the lines.
Here is our roadmap for today as we dive from the flat surface of a text all the way down to its deepest layers. First, decoding ancient texts. Second, the literal foundation. Third, the allegorical connection. Fourth, the moral application. And finally, the anagogical destination. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Decoding ancient texts. Let's set the stage.
Now there's this somewhat intimidating academic word, hermeneutics. But honestly, understanding it completely demystifies the entire process. Hermeneutics is simply the formal study of Bible interpretation, and it's a practice that has evolved over thousands of years. It reminds us that reading scripture isn't just about passively glancing at words on a page. It's a highly dynamic, historically rich practice. You're actually engaging in an active dialogue with the text. Well, there are literally dozens of ways to read scripture. The Christian tradition, dating all the way back to the early medieval church, relied heavily on a highly structured framework to make sense of these ancient writings. It's known as the Quadriga. And as the name kind of implies, this framework outlines exactly 4 primary levels or lenses of interpretation. By stacking these 4 lenses, readers can look way past the surface text to find historical context, moral guidance, and just incredibly deep spiritual meaning.
That brings us to Section 2. The literal foundation. This first lens serves as the absolute baseline for any reading experience.
Here is the crucial thing to remember. Before we go hunting for any hidden meanings or mystical revelations, we absolutely have to understand the author's actual words. This baseline lens focuses entirely on the plain meaning of the text. It asks us to look really closely at what the author actually wrote, the historical context they were writing in, the specific language they used, and the cultural setting of the time. You have to know what the words meant to the original audience first.
To put this into perspective, think about the famous parting of the Red Sea in the book of Exodus. If we're using our literal lens, we are simply focusing on the historical, plain text event. We're looking directly at the historical Israelites escaping Egypt under Moses' leadership. At this level, it is exactly what it says on the tin, a historical account of a specific event in time.
Moving on to Section 3, the allegorical connection. Once our historical foundation is locked in, we swap our glasses to look for those hidden bridges communicating across time.
So how does this build our understanding? Well, rather than just reading history, the allegorical lens looks for secondary meanings bubbling right beneath the literal text. The goal here is to see how a story points to a much larger spiritual truth. In this tradition, it primarily connects Old Testament events, people, or stories to New Testament realities, specifically Jesus Christ and the church. It's basically like finding a hidden foreshadowing in a story.
Let's stick with our Red Sea anchor to see how this works. The allegorical lens completely transforms that historical crossing of water into a foreshadowing or a type of Christian baptism. Through this lens, the crossing isn't just a physical escape from an ancient empire anymore. It actually represents a spiritual reality where believers are saved from the spiritual bondage of sin. The historical event becomes this beautiful symbolic bridge to a later spiritual practice.
Next up, Section 4, the moral application. For this lens, we shift away from history and theology and we get super personal. We ask how these ancient narratives serve as an active mirror for our modern lives. This perspective is all about translating ancient laws and events into daily ethical guidance for the individual believer. It asks a very direct, pointed question. How does this highly specific, ancient text apply to how I am living my life right now? The whole goal here is to extract tangible moral lessons, virtues, and day-to-day behavioral guidance straight out of the text.
Think about it this way. When you are facing your own metaphorical, impassable seas, the moral interpretation of the Red Sea story gives you a behavioral template. It shifts the focus entirely on trusting God and having courage in seemingly impossible situations. It pulls the core virtue right out of the narrative, basically giving you the courage to take a massive step of faith when you feel totally trapped by your own circumstances.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the anagogical destination. This is where we look toward the furthest horizon with our final and most expansive lens.
The word anagogical actually comes from a Greek word meaning leading upward, and that is exactly what this lens does. It zooms all the way out, it views biblical events and promises purely through the lens of eternity, the end times, and the ultimate destiny of humanity. The goal here is to find the final, heavenly, or future-oriented fulfillment of the Scripture.
So, passing our Red Sea escape through this ultimate lens, it isn't just history, it isn't just a foreshadowing of baptism, and it's definitely not just a daily moral lesson. It represents our soul's grand, cosmic journey through this earthly wilderness toward its ultimate home in heaven. The text is quite literally leading our perspective upward, past the here and now, straight toward eternity.
Now, to really wrap your head around this, look at how perfectly this entire framework comes together when we map all 4 layers onto one single anchor point. Take the city of Jerusalem, for example. When you read the word Jerusalem in a text, the literal sense tells you, okay, it's a physical, historical city in Judea. But the allegorical sense, it tells you it represents the Church of Christ. The moral sense tells you it represents the individual human soul. And then the anagogical sense tells you it represents the ultimate heavenly city of God. I mean, that is just incredible. 4 beautifully distinct, rich layers of meaning, all extracted from one single concept.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really hope this multi-dimensional toolkit totally transforms your reading experience. Because what the Quadriga shows us is that a text can be historically true, spiritually symbolic, personally challenging, and eternally focused, literally all at the exact same time. It just makes you wonder what fascinating depths you might discover next time you sit down with a book. So I'm going to leave you with this. What hidden layers will you find the next time you read? Are you going to stop at the surface, or will you let the text lead you upward?